Here's my hot take. Best of lists should come out at the beginning of the next year, not at the end of the year. If you're putting out your best of list at the end of November, the beginning of December, you're missing out on like a 1/12 of what's going to come out over the course of the year. This is why the 2023 best of list for Pitchfork gave the #1 spot to a 2022 album. Just wait 1 month, guys, and you can actually get it right. Just kidding, you can never get it right. I can think of 10 albums I'd like to have heard before making this list that I've still not listened to. I've totally neglected hip-hop this year. It's really sad. But as of the beginning of 2025, these are my 35 top albums of 2024. If you stick around to the very end of the list, I'll show you a few honorable mentions that I liked enough that they were on the list at some point, and I even wrote some stuff about, but that just didn't end up making it into the top 35 by the time everything was said and done, in case you need more than 35 albums. I'm Michael, and this is Eclecticism, or as my mom likes to call it, my internet thing. I'm going to go through the first numbers very quickly, just a sentence or two about each one, and then as we get towards the end, I'll spend a little bit more time on each one. I think that's it.
And here we go.
Amyl and the Sniffers, Cartoon Darkness. So this is always a kick-ass band, and this album makes me think they're even more ambitious than I'd realized before, aiming at being the world's biggest rock band, not just being the biggest punk band. They have several of their career high points on here for me, but it's also brought down by more than one track I'm often tempted to skip and don't really love. Pie Pie, Sacred Times. The third album by this Montreal band is a fun, dancey, new wavy garage rock that has great hooks and a really good energy. It might have ended up higher on my list if I didn't just learn about it like a week ago. Whores, War. The sophomore album by Whores is a heavy, angry, grungy, and quick-moving blast of energy. It reminds me a lot of Pissed Jeans and other greats of noise rock like that. Zombina and the Skeletones, The Call of Zombina. This Liverpool band has returned with their first album in a decade, and it's an incredibly fun mix of B-movie horror and pop punk. Zombina's vocals often remind me of the B-52s, and a strong part of that is the fun campiness of their approach to horror punk. The Last Dinner Party, Prelude to Ecstasy. The debut album from this London band is full of memorable hooks and nods to glam, while still feeling like modern pop rock. The biggest hit from this one, Nothing Matters, isn't even one of my favorites from it because the competition's so fierce on here. Judas Priest, Invincible Shield. The new Judas Priest album is their most focused and powerful since Painkiller, and on top of that, their songwriting's on point here too. I have no idea how Rob Halford can still hit those ridiculous high notes. Igloo Ghost, Tidal Memory XO. I haven't been especially into weird electronic music this year, but this one rose above the pack for me because it was so well produced and it manages to be so experimental and so fun at the same time. Dödsrit, Nocturnal Will. The fourth album by this black metal band from Sweden manages to bridge atmospheric black metal with a bit of crust metal and has some of the strongest and most memorable riffs I've heard this year. For a good part of this year, this was still my top metal album. Paranol, Sky 100. Paranol released one of my very favorite albums just last year, and I was excited about Sky 100. This one is also excellent and mixes dream pop and shoegaze, but it has slightly fewer standout tracks to me than the last album, After the Magic. Kim Gordon, The Collective. Kim Gordon's second solo album continues her move into experimental hip-hop, with what I find to be a slightly more consistent and exciting collection of tracks than on her first solo album, No Home Record. I love that she's continuing to feel cutting edge into her 70s at this point. Black Doldrums, In Limerence. The sophomore album by this London post-punk band feels more focused, confident, heavy, and overall has a darker, more gothic tone from their previous work. I'm really enjoying watching this band's evolution, and this was a post-punk standout for me this year. Slim Cessna's Auto Club, Kinnery of Lupercalia, Buell Legion. The gothic country band's seventh album is mostly upbeat and beautiful, but the bizarre narratives of these songs make it an unforgettable album as well. Julie, My Anti-Aircraft Friend. The debut full-length from Julie feels less shoegaze than past projects, and has stronger elements of slacker rock and grunge. It absolutely works for me though, feeling like it delivers on the promise of their EPs and then some. Amaro Freitas. Yee! This is a subtle floating jazz album that shifts into sounding like Third Stream on its last half. The meditative and almost ambient mood makes this one stand out for me among the jazz releases this year. Anja Huva, Codes. Decades after Ich Will Deutschland broke up, Huva has finally decided to return to music. Her first solo album returns to the moody darkness of the best Ich Will Deutschland albums, and I really hope this album isn't just a one-off. High Viz, Guided Tour. This London rock band's third album is a confident blending of post-punk, baggy, and punk vocals that is just beautiful. There's an album you probably expected to see on this list that you're not gonna see, and the reason's because this was the forward-looking yet endlessly fun post-punk album I really couldn't get enough of. So I didn't really spend much time with that other one. Hello Mary, Emida Ox. This New York City trio released their self-titled album last year, an alternative rock-influenced album with more than its share of strong hooks. They followed it up now with this year's Emida Ox, and this new album feels worlds more confident, with more sonic experimentation and genre boundary pushing. There are still stunning melodies like on 3 and Knowing You, but you also have them pushing into more noise rock territory and a greater complexity in their song structures, while still managing to keep every song focused and concise. Although I already liked this band, I was caught off guard by how much they developed in just a year. Adrienne Linker, Bright Future. Fresh off of creating Big Thief's most ambitious and impressive album yet, their singers released what I think is her best solo album yet as well. Bright Future is introspective, gentle, thoughtful, playful, and roughly produced, making it feel almost like home demos. This all adds up to feel almost like reading someone's diary, or something that's not necessarily made for broad consumption. This album also has some of the most stunning gems of Americana or folk songwriting of recent memory. If you enjoy singer-songwriters, country or folk, you need to hear this one. Godspeed You Black Emperor. No title, as of 13 February 2024, 28,340 dead. It's likely that if you're browsing around music-related channels online, you already know about Godspeed, but if you don't, you have some amazing exploring ahead of you. This Montreal post-punk band formed in 1994. They've released 2 bona fide classics, and have consistently put out good work since then. Part of it may be the emotional power of the subject matter. The non-title is a reference to the death toll in the Gaza genocide. I'm aware that something I'm still trying to get better at on this channel is actually talking about the music. It's kind of the hardest thing for me to do, especially as a non-musician. I often focus on a little history of the band, I often focus on lyrics. There's no lyrics to depend on for this album though. And I also can't really compare them to anyone because I don't feel like there's any other bands currently working in this space who are on their level. They're making rock-informed music that defies the usual song structures you find within rock and moves beyond it. In terms of the instrumentation as well, it goes beyond what you usually see in rock music, feeling almost symphonic at times, with building, swelling crescendos. Honestly, for me, this is one of the most emotionally powerful albums this year, despite the complete lack of lyrics. Waxahachie, Tiger's Blood. Katie Crutchfield, or Waxahachie, made a musical pivot on her 5th album, 2020's St. Cloud. Instead of her previous indie rock sound, Crutchfield began exploring country and folk. This new context bringing out the beauty of her voice more, the strength of her songwriting a bit more as well. With Tiger's Blood, her 6th album, she moved even more confidently in this direction, with a more diverse range of song styles and tempos. Right Back to It was a big hit on this one, but it's not even one of my favorites from the album. For me, it's the simplest songs with the most emotion packed into their vocals, like 365 and Three Sisters. Songs like these show off just how much you can do with minimal instrumentation, and they both manage to get stuck in my head despite neither being focused on any choruses. The melody throughout is irresistible and her voice just sounds so good. Meaningful Stone, Angel Interview. Meaningful Stone is Kim Jamin, a South Korean musician who has been releasing music since 2017. Her first album, 2020's A Call From My Dream, won the Rookie of the Year award in the Korean Music Awards. I started listening to her because I saw this album cover and I immediately had to know what it sounded like. It actually sounds a lot like the cover, and it's terrific. Angel Interview is her 2nd album, and I've given it a bit more time and re-listens than her debut. It's hard to describe, in part because she covers enough ground here to evade any simple genre descriptions, but I'd say it's closest to an indie rock and dream pop sound, at least until you get to the final track, and I'll just let that be a surprise for you. It's different. This was a year that I found more good dream pop than I could really include on this list, but this, amongst the dream pop, was a real standout for me. Candy, It's Inside You. This Richmond, Virginia hardcore band stays hardcore, but does so much experimenting on this album that it's breathtaking. This has been a recent discovery for me, so I'm not well versed in their back catalog, but ever since I came across this album, it's really stood out amongst the many quality punk releases this year. They incorporate electric elements, noise, hip-hop beats on occasion, some elements that even feel like dream pop. Yes, dream pop and hardcore. But it works, tonally and musically, when it really doesn't seem like it should. It's glorious when a band can make an album that feels like it could literally take you anywhere as it goes along, without losing the identity of the album. And this is an album that can manage that. Alceste, Les Chants de l'Aurore. This is the 7th album by French pioneers of black gaze music, Alceste. Alceste is mainly the project of Nige, who apparently began creating music that sounds like a merging of black metal with shoegaze without having ever actually heard shoegaze before. He was simply trying to create music that captured the feeling of a series of childhood memories where he believed himself to be seeing into another world or dimension. The music has that sort of quality as well. It feels like metal made by a race of noble elves or something. Alceste is one of the few bands who, for my particular music taste, just never feels like they make a wrong note or a wrong move. I've loved everything they've put out. Every one of them has been great. Compared to especially the last 2 albums, this one feels very melodic, very upbeat. It feels like the cover of the album, like a sunrise. It feels like their most hopeful release in a while as well, especially considering the last 2, Kodama and Spiritual Instinct, have been some of the heaviest albums they've done in their later career. Jordy Griep, The New Sound. No album has been as hard to slot into this list as Jordy Griep's debut solo album, The New Sound. At times, it feels absolutely brilliant, with this incredible musical range, sliding from prog to jazz to AOR to I don't even know what, with Griep's crooning vocals about masculinity and sexuality, creating a focus no matter how far afield the music goes from what you might expect. I was very disappointed when I found out Jordy Griep's past band, Black Midi, was breaking up. They've been one of my favorite bands of recent memory. They just bring so much creativity and such a unique sound within rock. So I'm glad to see this solo album and see that Jordy Griep is going to keep contributing something strange and cool within the music landscape. The first track here feels like a jazzier take on a Black Midi number, rising to breakneck speeds and including intricate, exciting musicianship. Then, the second track settles into a relaxed dance rhythm. Is it a rumba, maybe? Don't quote me on that, I'm just guessing. Then the third mixes rock and a gospel chorus. And we continue in this fashion with no 2 songs really feeling that closely linked genre-wise, but the whole still feeling like a united body of work. Griep's vocals on this album have a very theatrical and retro crooning style that feels reminiscent of like the 40s or the 50s, kind of like an awkward, forgotten member of the Rat Pack. This gives the whole album an out of time and iconoclastic feeling. Yes, the lyrics connect to the weird moment of insecure masculinity we're in the midst of, but insecure men wrestling with their relationship to sexuality is nothing really new either. So the subject matter feels both contemporary and timeless. Because of how strange and hard to define this album is, it's gone as high as the top 5 for me, and it's gone as low as close to 30. I don't know if I'm happy where this landed on the list, but I know that it's an album worth checking out. Chatpile, Cool World. I don't know how I've been missing out on this band until now, because this is great stuff. Chatpile is a 4-piece out of Oklahoma City. They identify as a dirtbag metal band, but they've been called sludge metal in the press. And when I listen to them, I think a little of stenchcore bands like Amoebics or Filth of Mankind. Maybe not because of the music as much as maybe more about the feeling of the music than the genre itself. Because this sounds like some wild, decaying urban space, full of gradually decomposing factories, poisons leaking into the soil, and 9 million ways to get tetanus. There's a punk energy, riffs that are just slightly reminiscent of nu metal, but in a good way. Whatever you want to call it genre-wise, it's one of the more inventive, heavy albums of the year, and one that's been growing more and more on me with every listen. They refer to the album as a big anti-war statement, both referencing the genocide in Gaza and hoping the message connects more broadly to wars throughout history. The band's name, Chatpile, is taken from the piles of toxic mining waste that have been abandoned by mining companies all over northern Oklahoma. Their music's heavy gloom matches the subject matter well, making this a very powerful and timely metal album. Okay, here we are. It's the top 10.
Hold on to your butts.
At 10, we have JB Nelson, Body Bags Crashing. This artist is very new to me, and I wasn't able to find a whole lot on the internet, so here's what I've got. He's from the UK, and he's been releasing gothic country since about 2008, under a variety of different names, including Sleepy Eyed Johnson, under a variety of different names, including Sleepy Eyes Nelson and Longshot Nelson. He's released upwards of 40 albums in that time. I found out about him not too long ago after someone made a comment on that gothic country video. So I'm still new to this artist, but this one really just shot up the rankings for me when I started listening to it. The lyrics feel pitch black. The production is adventurous with electronic elements, but these fit within the gothic country vibe of the whole album. It feels like a very dark journey into the mind of someone on the very fringes of society, and the strength of the songwriting makes it an enjoyable place to be. This one sadly doesn't look like it's in any physical formats, but you can find it on Bandcamp, so if you're into gothic country, give this under-recognized artist a listen. Opeth, The Last Will and Testament. At number 9.5, because it's a last-minute addition that I can't believe I forgot, Opeth's 14th album, The Last Will and Testament. This time around, Opeth has brought more metal into their prog than on the last few, and have created a big ol' metal opera. The story is the reading of The Last Will and Testament of, as band leader Mikhail Okerfeldt describes him, a stern old conservative, paranoid, evil, noble fuck. His 3 children are there to witness the reading, all expecting to get their fair share. But the reading of the will reveals much of the family history that was unknown to the children. The songs all correspond to a paragraph of the will, as more family secrets, and the fates of his children, are gradually revealed. And then the final song forms a sort of coda that reveals things outside of the will, which provides a final, darkly humorous plot twist. This album's been hailed as a bit of a comeback album, but in my eyes, Opeth never went anywhere. Anytime a previously metal band goes and makes an album that's not metal enough, metal fans tend to get annoyed. In my eyes, when Opeth leaves the metal aside and makes prog music, they're still really good. Sorceress, in particular, is a very underrated album. To me, this album isn't a great album because it's a return to metal. It's a great album because, once again, it's Opeth just doing what they do and making a really great work of art. Kali Uchis, Orchideas. At 9, we have a favorite artist of mine that I don't think I've mentioned yet on this channel, Kali Uchis, with her 4th album, Orchideas, or however you say it. She has a very genre-fluid approach to songwriting and a really wonderful voice. Her first album sounds to me the most like what I'd consider a typical pop album. With her second, she created a dreamy and gorgeous album that's all in Spanish, and it's one of my favorite pop albums of recent memory. This 4th album explores Latin pop and dance music, blending them with trap and contemporary R&B. It's easy to identify her appreciation of Björk and how adventurous she is with sound. This was recorded around the same time as her 3rd album, Red Moon and Venus, which is a more consistently sultry and possibly more radio-friendly album. Orchideas, for me, is the stronger album because of its adventurousness, because of its scope and breadth. It's playful and it's unpredictable. I'd say that 4 albums in, this probably ranks as my 2nd favorite of the Kali Uchis catalog, but once again, it's cementing the fact that she is one of the greatest pop artists of the time. To me, she is. Aruj Aftab, Night Rain. Aruj Aftab's 4th album is the follow-up to Vulture Prince, which was the stunning 2021 album that put her on my radar. She's returned with an album that's gorgeous, gentle, and feels very much like the cover looks, like music appropriate for a calm, reflective night. Her voice is smooth and warm and subtle, the song slowly rolling and shifting, sometimes without discernible choruses and with fluid song structures. Just a calming river of sound flowing over you. Sometimes albums with a lot of features can feel very disjointed or unfocused. There are quite a few features on here, but that's definitely not the case here. Even the one feature that had me a little bit surprised, More Mother, who does sort of an experimental jazzy hip-hop, really fits into the sound. It's all integrated really, really well. This album's just gorgeous from beginning to end, and it just once again shows what a talented and versatile artist she is. Jessica Pratt, Here in the Pitch. Number 7 is the 4th album by Jessica Pratt, a songwriter from Redding, California. With this one, she's delivered something that feels subtle, haunted, and out of time. Her vocals sounding like they're running through a metal pipe from another floor or something. The songwriting is delicate, the lyrics evocative and often melancholy. She has a very unique voice, both literally and in terms of the music she's made on her last couple albums, with melodies that are infectious despite how simple and stripped back the tracks are. Often the foreground is just her voice and a guitar. Percussion's often only used in a few moments in a track. Instead of a string section, you might hear one soft string deep in the mix. The songs sometimes feel more implied than finished, and then the album is over in less than 30 minutes. It's a gentle, strange, and beautiful ride. At number 6, let's finally talk about the big green monster itself, Brat. This is the 6th studio album by Charli XCX, a pop artist who's had a significant influence on the development of the hyperpop genre, and because of this, the direction pop has taken as well. Brat is almost inevitably Charli XCX's biggest album, because for the first time in a good long while, a pop album became everyone's favorite reference for a few months this summer. It was critically revered, commercially successful, embraced by longtime fans, and it caught the attention of a lot of new fans. None of that's about the music though, so let's talk about the music. This feels like more of a club album, with a higher number of dance-focused tracks than her usual. The album's lyrics are intentionally simple, almost to the point of text speak, often not even rhyming. Charli wanted the lyrics to feel conversational, as unpolished as something she'd actually say to a friend. This, combined with her emotional vulnerability on many of these tracks, makes it a pop album written from the point of view of a celebrity, who you can still relate to, because the emotions are universal. We all know the feeling of jealousy, of being somewhere that we don't fit in, of losing someone. It's both larger than life and very down to earth, polished and carefully produced, yet intentionally imperfect. So I've been a longtime fan of Charli XCX since way before the Brat era, and as a longtime fan, part of me is saying, why now? I've even talked to some people who apparently only like Brat, when it really just feels like a combination of what she's done in the past, maybe with a little bit more dance. There's no sea change here, there's no real change in her inspirations or what she's pulling from, or even her lyrics. So if you're just discovering Charli XCX now, please go listen to How I'm Feeling Now, listen to Pop 2, listen to some of her other albums that are just as good as Brat. Magdalena Bay, Imaginal Disc. This is the second album by a pop duo originally from Miami, Florida. So these two began working together back in high school, and before moving into pop, were actually part of a prog band. It would be overstating it a little to say this is prog pop, but it's an album with wonderful shifts and transitions. There's an opening track that connects to the closer, and there's a whole lot that makes this a rewarding listen, and an even more rewarding re-listen. If all of that makes it sound like it's not really a pop album, make no mistake. This is a sugarcoating, it's got hooks for days, and even though I haven't heard of the word tossed around, it even has me thinking about hyperpop and just how sweet and sugary it feels. This follows up the also excellent, but less ambitious, Mercurial World from 2021. But maybe it's wrong to call a band's debut album less ambitious, because they probably needed that sort of a foundation to be able to really shoot for the moon on a second album. Mercurial World was one of my favorite pop albums of 2021, but this is still another situation where I was caught off guard by just how much bigger and better Magdalena Bay has gotten in just a few years. This is absolutely a band to keep your eye on. At number 4 is the 4th album by Mannequin Pussy, I Got Heaven. I'm gonna spend a little less time on this one since it was featured in my last video, so if you wanna know more about Mannequin Pussy, check out Fempunk. To summarize though, Mannequin Pussy merged the aggression of punk with gentler rock sounds. This is an example of a band that started out punk, but has never stopped exploring and expanding on their sound. With this album, the punk attitude is still there, but they've grown immensely musically, making what I find to be their best album yet. Blood Incantation, Absolute Elsewhere. Blood Incantation is a death metal band from Denver, Colorado, who had already established themselves as a monumental act with their first 2 albums. Their third album, Time Wave Zero, left a lot of fans confused by turning away from metal and creating a big, spacey, ambient album. Looking back on that now, it seems like it was maybe a necessary transition point for the band, since they're following it up with their most ambitious work yet. Absolute Elsewhere's 2 epic tracks blend death metal with progressive rock and ambient music, shifting easily back and forth between these seemingly very different sound palettes. I've heard this referred to as morbid Floyd, like Morbid Angel and Pink Floyd, which does capture at least part of what this album is doing. And I guess it sounds more metal than Pink Angel. But moving past the list of genres and the influences, both of these songs are incredibly precise and stunning. On the first few listens, Absolute Elsewhere feels amazing for how quick these songs grow, evolve, and shift into new forms. But after a few listens, when the overall shape of the songs start to become more familiar, you can hone in on just how beautifully executed each component part is, how great riffs are in a passage that only occurs one time on the album, the care and precision that went into all of these little fractals in this amazing kaleidoscope. Now, obviously, Blood Incantation isn't the first band to try and do prog metal, but their take on it on this album doesn't feel like anything I can look back and point to. It's a really unique combination of elements, and it's just beautiful. The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. And number 2 is a predictable inclusion, but it's a well-earned one. The Cure are back with their best album in a very long time. This ranks higher than some of their classic albums for me. This has the emotional weight of their best work, its gloomy darkness reminding me of their third album, Faith. The instrumentation is lush, the tempo often slow and lumbering, like an aged beast that's now struggling with every step it takes. This matches the subject matter, which ponders age, death, the fragility of life and love, and the violence of war. Part of what makes this so good is that it feels so authentic. This doesn't feel like The Cure trying to sound like they did at any point in the past. This sounds like Robert Smith writing from his point of view now, and articulating that point of view with heartbreaking nuance. The songs have all the glittering dark beauty of some of their best work on albums like Disintegration. There aren't any obvious singles here, but for fans of The Cure, there are strong choruses and melodies you'll remember long after the album stopped. It does seem like an kind of obvious comparison, but this does remind me of David Bowie's Black Star and how it's an artist who's made all of these classic albums and they're coming back and writing from the perspective of someone late in their life with regrets and all of these experiences and capturing that just as well as they captured things on their earlier classic albums. This is definitely not a rehash, this is a new classic from a great band. And my number 1 is Chelsea Wolfe's 7th album, She Reaches Out to She, Reaches Out to She. Wolfe has been working in some liminal space between folk, industrial, and rock. Earlier this year, I described this new album as what Björk might make if she grew up in a haunted castle, and I still think that's a pretty good description. It has industrial elements, some trip-hop, a lot of fantastic production, but at the core are songs that were written acoustically by Wolfe and are some of the strongest of her career. When producer Dave Sitek began having ideas for expanding the sonic palette of the album, she embraced this shift in the sound. These feel both organic and mechanical, dark and heavy, yet fragile. She said of the album, "This one feels like a culmination of everything that I've explored." Another big change is how the vocals were mixed. Instead of being buried or altered, as they have often been on her past projects, you can hear just how stunning her voice is on this album, and all of the emotion coming through the vocals. I don't believe the lyrics reference it directly, but this marks the first album Wolfe has made since going sober after a very long struggle with alcoholism. In fact, she began drinking at age 11, and it has been a part of her life up until 2021. Another inspiration for the album was a friend of hers finally ending a very long and toxic relationship, which must have in some ways mirrored her moving on from this decades-long relationship with alcohol. And then the third big influence was her diving deeper into an exploration of witchcraft. I've kind of assumed she was a witch throughout her whole career, to be honest. The title, She Reaches Out to She, Reaches Out to She, is a reference to one's past self and one's future self, and the connections between them. The reaching out is both a nurturing, a trying to heal or protect your future self with your actions now, and a reference to the cyclical nature of trauma, the constant presence and recurrence of the past. Despite its darkness, it's still a hopeful album. Yes, it's about trauma, but it's also about healing and nurturing. 2024 has been a dark year for anyone who's paying attention, so this is perhaps the only kind of hope that feels fully authentic and genuinely healing right now. A hope that doesn't turn away from trauma, fear, or darkness, because all of those are part of our experiences. And all of this is why Chelsea Wolfe's She Reaches Out to She, Reaches Out to She is my album of the year. And since we're wrapping up 2024, the Eclecticism channel is a little bit less than 6 months old now. I've been really pleasantly surprised by the kind of response that the channel's gotten so far. It's been a very fun experience, and it's been sort of a bright spot in a pretty tough year. Several of the bands on this list I only found out about because of the comments on the videos. I have some big plans for the channel in 2025. I don't want to go into them too much because who knows what's going to happen. But I really hope you do stick around and subscribe, and let me know about your top albums of 2024. Thanks for watching Eclecticism. And now, without further ado, the honorable mentions.